Today's episode of In the Trenches is brought to you by System 12 Guitar Method. Sign up today at ryanroxie.com.
In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie.
Hello, and welcome to another live stream episode of In the Trenches. I am your host, Ryan Roxie. Hello, guys. What's happening, guys and gals? Gather into the chat right now on the Ryan Roxie official channel. If you are watching us on Facebook Live, thank you very much. But we really want you over on the YouTube channel, Ryan Roxie Official, and hit that subscribe button. You know, I say it every single week, and I never point to it the right way, but there you go. And if you are listening to us on an audio platform, thank you very much. But, I do thank you, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, all those audio podcast platforms. Thank you very much for supporting the show, and thank you for listening to us on it. But we want you at the YouTube official channel because this is a visual show, and you actually can be interactive as well in the live chat. And we will prove it by putting up your post as the show goes on. And I'm feeling good today. I really am. This is one of those things where we have a show. Some good news happened just a few hours before the podcast. So I will be giving you some special news, hopefully at the halfway break. And our guest today, apparently in the last 24 hours, has come across a revelation, an epiphany. And hopefully this will be our exclusive. Who is our guest, you ask us? Well, today, our guest, guitarist, manager, public speaker, record producer. The list can go on and on and on. But you know what? He's one of my favorite guitarists from rock and roll's most rebellious bands. Founding member of Twisted Sister. Would you welcome, please, Mr. J.J. French. Hello, J.J. How you doing? We usually have that piped in, don't worry.
Yeah, there's a photo that appeared in a heavy metal book on the history of Bang Your Head, which is a famous German festival. And it just so happens that the photo that they use in the double gatefold of the opening of the book is not only a picture of Twisted Sister on stage, but I am the only guy turned around to the photographer. So you see the back of all the guys, but you see me. And then there's 50,000 people out there. So it looks like I'm photoshopped at Woodstock, right?
Early Photoshop.
So Eddie Ojeda made a joke. He said, man, if that was me, I'd put that on my wall and I'd have like a running tape in my living room that just goes, it's a very impressive looking picture. It looks so fake.
JJ, you do not have any room on your walls because they are covered with gold and platinum records, folks. And for those of you, some of us in our chat room that's a little bit from the younger generation, those friends are vinyl records, And in fact, they've made a comeback, but those ones you can't play. How many of those you got back there?
Well, I have a 37 total. And what happened was when I got married, I went from a man cave to a man room to a man drawer. So I have a guitar pick in a drawer that tells you I'm in Twisted Sister. So my wife, I had an ego room where I had everything up, when I used to have artists over, they, wow, whoa, And
I like the ego room.
I took it all down and it's all in the storeroom. So this is there's about 12 here. And there's another 30, or there's another 27. And so if people wonder why that is, it's not just Twisted, which is a lot of them, but it's Seven Dust, it's Lordy, it's all the records I've appeared on as a guitar player, or producer or manager or whatever. So there's a lot of stuff. And also there are multiple records in multiple countries. And I'm grateful, I'm enormously grateful. However, to put this in perspective for those musicians out there who dream about a quote gold record or something like that. One day I was looking at the wall and I was saying to myself, wow, if you showed me that wall when I was 20 and said, look what you have, I would think, oh my God, I must be the most famous person on earth, a billionaire, and oh, what a great life. And in reality, I kind of came to the conclusion that the price I paid to get all of that was worth it, but it was tough. You pay a really high price to get to that level, and the rejections were horrible, and the ups and the downs were severe. And the only way I conquered them was that I don't do drugs and drink. So I consider the fact that I don't do that as the ability to keep coming back after all these rejections. I didn't have to hide myself. I didn't have to, run away and get wasted in the process and try to get over it. I confronted each one of those challenges straight. And I talk about that in my upcoming book, Twisted Business, which is kind of the subtitle is like, we've been turned down more times in a bedsheet in a whorehouse and come back more times than Freddy Krueger, So there's been an awful lot. The highs have been extremely great, and the lows have been devastating. And you're in the entertainment business, and the lows crush people.
Right. But I think the thing that stands out for you and your band is perseverance as well, because the perseverance that you guys have endured. I mean, just doing the research on this podcast, and you formed Twisted Sister, in the early 70s, and you didn't really release anything until like the early 80s. So, you were grinding your teeth. You guys were in the trenches, so to speak. And it's not just because it's the name of the podcast, but you were definitely working your way through all the process, if you want to say that.
Well, most bands, though, have no idea the unique nature of the tri-state New York, New Jersey, Connecticut club era back in those days. So in those days, if you were good enough to play bars, you had a career, at least for a short term, that was stable and that would pay you consistently really good money. So we didn't starve by any means. I mean, the band was making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year as a bar band, which almost sounds impossible. We were working 52 weeks a year. In the early days, 6 nights a week. If you think about that for a second, if you think about that and you're a young band and you say to yourself, wow, man, we play a lot, we play twice a month. Well, the truth is in those days, you did 6 shows, you did 5 shows a night, 6 nights a week. So you did 30 shows, you did 30 performances a week. So if you just take a calculator, and you go 30 performances times 52, so that's 1,500 shows in 1 year.
Wow.
That's 1 year. So the first 2 years of the band, before D-Joint, we were at 3,000 shows.
Right.
Now, I mean, so I don't know, bands come up to me and they go, come and see my band. And I go, how many shows you played? And they go, I don't know, 100. And I said, well, when you get to 500, I'll come and see your band. Cause I'm thinking that you got to suck, I'm sure we sucked, So they go, we'll never get to 500. And I say, well, there's a good chance I'm never going to come and see your band. You got to play a lot to get good. And we had the ability to play a lot. And so we had 10 years of that. So by the time the band was signed, we had 7,000 shows really under our belt. I think 7,500. So that's how come the band has the resiliency and the ability to pull off what we pull off, because we've done it so much.
And you can't teach experience. That's the one thing I tell people all the time is, you can pretend that you've played 100 shows and act like you've been on it, because that's all part of the game too, because you have to have that bravado when you're on stage and confidence, but there's no replacement for that experience.
No, because what that experience teaches you is how to deal with every possible scenario that could possibly happen. And every possible scenario that could possibly happen happened to us, including the fact that a rival club owner blew up one of our trucks in the middle of a show one night.
What?
So,
what year was this?
In 70, we told this guy, the guy was a real racist. He made some very racist comments. And I decided after he's made those comments, I told my agent, I never want to play this room again. So he told the guy that we were going to play the room. About a month after that, we were playing a show in Long Island on a Saturday night. And there was about 2,000 people in this room. And I was singing Sweet Jane. and someone screamed out, "Your truck is on fire!" And they opened up the back door of the club, and our brand new 24-foot truck was in 50-foot flames, and it was in the middle of winter. And I said to my crew, "Is there gasoline in the gas tanks?" And they said, "Yeah, we filled it up." And I went, "Oh my God, if this thing blows up, this wall's going to come down and kill everybody in the room." So I said to everybody in the club, I said, please exit out the front door now, right now, just get out now. And the club emptied out, and I walked out into the parking lot, and it's in the middle of winter, but I'm completely stunned because our brand new 24-foot truck is in 50-foot flames. In fact, not only was our truck set on fire, but another band's truck was parked next to ours that had broken down the night before, and their truck was melting in the flames. Okay.
Collateral damage.
I'm standing in the parking lot. I'm wearing hot pants and 6-inch heels, pretty much in shock. The fire department's there, and they're telling everyone to clear out. I said, "I'm not leaving, man. My fucking truck is on fire, you know?" And a fan comes up to me and says, "Hey, man, are you going to finish the song?" Sweet Jane. I looked at him. I said, "Hey, asshole."
You know what would have been really cool is if you would have gone from Sweet Jane to say, "Light my fire." 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. Or I said, "Do you see what's my truck is on fire?" So we paid the price of not. And so okay. So we didn't know what happened. We just knew our truck was blown up. It turned out about a year after that, the ex-wife of one of the sons of the club owner came up to me at another club and said, "By the way, last year when your truck was destroyed at Speaks," yeah, she says, "that was done because so and so told his son to blow up your truck as payback for not playing his room." So we had that. I had a mob hit called on me. Had my knees broken. We played to. Most of the club owners back then were Italian guys. Most of them purportedly were involved. I mean, nobody personally invited me to a killing or a robbery or anything, but to put the perspective of our scene back then, I'm sure you've seen Goodfellas, right?
Oh yeah. 100
So
times.
Henry Hill, he worked at one of the bars that we played in.
Okay.
And I borrowed money on a fairly consistent basis from several of these club owners, and none of them ever gave me a problem. We played the shows we were supposed to play and paid them back, and I never paid vig. I never got threatened. But a recording studio owner warned me that a deal was made that I wasn't aware of with a producer that I did not know. He made a side deal. And basically, we owed the studio $26,000, and if I didn't pay the money, my legs would be broken. So at that point, we made a phone call to Tommy the Shoe, Freddie the Chair, Billy the Horse. You know, these guys we know because we played the bars in Long Island. And
good thing they didn't take your thumbs, JJ. They took my thumbs.
Yeah. And we made a call, and there was a sit down, you know, and we came to a copacetic agreement that if we paid them $10,000, they call off the hit. So, you know, okay. So here's the point is, I didn't join Twisted Sister to do any of this. I joined just to be a musician and a guitar player. And then over time, things just happen. And
this is all before you guys have this mega success.
Oh,
so,
way before.
I mean, so you're dealing with the real mafia before you had to deal with the record company mafia, which I'm sure we'll talk about in just a minute.
Well, the thing is that there's but let's go back even further. Okay. I was a drug dealer for 5 years before Twisted ever was in
Did not know that
the world. Yeah, I had a drug addict at the same time, and I was a street guy, and I dealt drugs, and I was a big pot dealer.
But you never did drugs.
Oh, I did. I was a drug addict, man.
Okay, so what happened? You just said at the beginning, okay, there has to be some sort of epiphany.
At about the same in 1970 in April of 72, after a 5-year run of dealing and doing every amount of drug you could imagine. And by the way, I was a hippie. So just think about the 60s. Think about what that meant. Think about living in New York in the 60s. Thinking about the amount of drugs that were in New York in the 60s. Thinking about the whole hippie scene. Think about the political climate. Yeah. I was involved with all of it. So
you were immersed.
I mean, Toby Mamus.
Oh yeah. We know Toby.
Toby's brother and I sued the Board of Education together. Okay.
So yeah.
For political reasons. Toby and I go back to 1968.
You were all over the spectrum in the 60s scene, pretty much.
So what happened was, after a 5-year run of dealing and doing, I woke up one morning and realized that if I continued on that path, I was going to die or be murdered, because I had already been almost murdered 5 times. Twice, guns put to my head, knives put to my throat, robbed in elevators in Harlem. Bad shit, you know.
So wearing makeup and Twisted Sister was no big deal at
nothing. No, as my mother said, you went from a drug dealer to a transvestite. Gee, what a great career choice. So what happened was I made a decision Easter Sunday 1972 to end everything, to end my drug use and everything. So I stopped on a dime on Easter Sunday 1972, and I woke up that Monday and I went, okay, that's it. Now what do I do? Now what do I do? And I was stumbling around for the next 2 or 3 months, and I wound up joining an Allman Brothers cover band in the summer of '72. And we lived in a hippie commune in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. We did one show. The band broke up. I came home in September and got a subscription to Fusion magazine. And on the cover of Fusion was David Bowie. And the story was about Ziggy Stardust. And I was like, whoa, who is this guy? What? I mean, I was an uber hippie. So I didn't know from, Glam, but oh my God, this looks amazing. So I decided this is what I want to do. I want a glitter band. But at the same time, the New York Dolls were playing at the Mercer Arts Center, and my friends were very close to the Dolls, and they said, why don't you come down and see the Dolls? And I was obsessed with Bowie and Lou Reed and Mott the Hoople. They all kind of came together at the same time, which is September '72, because Bowie not only had Space Oddity, not only had Ziggy Stardust, but he also produced Transformer by Lou Reed, and he also wrote All the Young Dudes. So I looked at Bowie as like, oh my God,
a little bit of inspiration there.
Totally. We're the Beatles. I say the Beatles were my Saturn V rocket that lifted me off, and Bowie was my retro rocket that took me to the stars. So I go to see the Dolls, and every week for like a month. And, their image was amazing. I just didn't like the band. I just didn't think they played well. I didn't even understand how you could suck that badly playing and look that good. And I knew Johnny Thunders because Johnny was like a client, in Central Park.
He was a client.
Among other things. I mean, I knew these guys, I knew these guys, and the girls who took me to the show lived with Bill and Syl in England the summer before that. So I knew the scene, but I just didn't understand the where they were coming from, because I was a Fillmore East hippie. And for those of you who don't understand what that means that from 1968 to 1971, if you lived in New York City, you could go see Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, Janis Joplin, Leon Russell,
you name it.
Yeah, every weekend for $3. For $3, you could see them all. In fact, you saw them 4 times a week. 4 times a weekend for $12 if you wanted to. You saw The Who for a whole week, $3 a night. You saw Crosby, Stills and Nash for a whole week, $3 a night. If you couldn't afford the 3, you went to Central Park and saw them at the Schaefer Festival in the park. So with all of this greatness and the assimilation of going to see Jimi Hendrix on a nightly basis, or seeing Jeff Beck on a nightly basis, or seeing Led Zeppelin on a nightly basis.
Are those some of your ticket stubs right there?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, you did your research. So you go to these shows, right? And you come home at 4:00 in the morning, having just, I stumbled into Zeppelin's first show, opening for Iron Butterfly, front row seat. Okay. I bought a front row ticket. I had 5 pounds of weed on me. I figured, how bad could Inagata Davida be? I'll smoke my way through Inagata Davida, right? Fuck that.
It could be long.
And it didn't matter. I had that much weed. I mean, I smoked so much weed. I smoked so much weed about a month after Woodstock, 10 years after I headlined the Fillmore. I love telling this story. The Kinks were opening. So I had a front row seat. So I'm sitting there, and I had tons of weed. I'm smoking like crazy. And I fall asleep during the Kinks show, I guess. And I wake up, I hear, good night. And I looked at the guy next to me. I said, oh, it was 10 years after coming on. He said, dude, you slept through the whole thing. You slept through 10 years after.
You almost slept for 10 years.
I slept through 10 years after. I going home, I slept. He goes, yeah. I said, why didn't you wake me up? He said, I don't know who the fuck you are. Why am I going to wake you up? You could kill me. So anyway, the point being is, with all this greatness, I didn't understand the retro nature of what the Dolls were doing. I didn't think it was like hip and cool. I just thought they kind of sucked. And that's, oh, it's blasphemy. Oh, the Dolls are a brilliant band. You know, listen, they look great and they were definitely inspirational, without a doubt. They were inspirational. I would look at them and go, wow, look at that. But I wanted a band that could play, and that was the inspiration too.
But maybe that's why glam rock left a little bit of a taste in your mouth, a sour taste in your mouth. Because I've heard, and I'm not certain, but the term, when people would, I guess, put the genre of glam metal to Twisted, you were like, no, or, you know, maybe it was D that said that, but I know that the band didn't really take that kindly to glam metal, because in my opinion, you guys are straight up rock and roll.
We were a straight up rock band. What we were was, we were a bar band from the 70s that made it in the 80s. And we looked like we looked because we wanted to shock people. But we had there was no, were we androgynous? No. Were we bisexual? No. We were just a hard ass bar band. And bar bands make the greatest band. I mean, look, whatever you want to say about Nugent's politics, he's great because he played in bars. You know, he learned how to do it. Jay Giles learned how to do it. You know, Springsteen learned how to do it. When you can learn in bars how to do it, but you ask the Rolling Stones and AC/DC, and they all played in clubs for years. They killed themselves, and You're
forgetting Ted Nugent also looks really amazing in a loincloth at one point in his life as well.
Well, I have to tell you, I saw Nugent open for Aerosmith in 1975 at Madison Square Garden. I had never seen Nugent, and he was incredible. And
$3 or more than $3 at that point, maybe $7,
maybe $5 at the Garden. Maybe
I love it.
Maybe $5, but he was incredible. And Aerosmith couldn't play their way out of a paper bag. They were so fucked up. Now Aerosmith, to their credit, cleaned up their act and became a great band. So I've seen Aerosmith after that, and they were great. So let's not get people going, hey man, you said Aerosmith. So, no, they went through a bad period. Right. Okay. And they'll tell you they went through a bad period. Right. What most people don't know is how bad Zeppelin got. People think Zeppelin. Okay, let me set the record straight. In 1969 to 1972, Led Zeppelin was one of the greatest live bands you would ever want to see. But by 1975, whatever started to have its effect on Jimmy, and Robert's voice was starting to go. And by 1977, they were fairly unlistenable. In fact, by 1977, on their last tour, we couldn't give tickets away at our show to see Zeppelin. And so let me explain how that works. We had a fan who was a ticket hustler, and he would give us tickets at our shows. We would have a contest, a drinking contest or something, and we'd give some tickets away to an event. So one night he said, I got 4 Zepp tickets and you guys can give them away. And nobody wanted to go see Zepp. Why? Because the bar bands at the time were playing Zeppelin better than Led Zeppelin was playing Zeppelin. So you could see Zebra or Rat Race Choir, and they were all doing Zepp better than Zepp. So we couldn't give tickets away to see Zeppelin. So I went, because I figured, well, I've seen him in 69. I saw him in 70. I saw him in 72. I saw him in 75. I want to see him in 77. They were awful. And I sat there for 3 hours watching John Bonham play drums, because he's one of the greatest drummers in the world. And so you could watch John. But, this was the world we came out of.
If you're wondering, folks, why there's a guy for this and a guy for that there in the Twisted Sister world and JJ French's world, it's because they're a New York band and everybody's connected in New York in one way or another. We do have this animation that we usually start this whole section out that you've been eloquently speaking of for the last 10 minutes, but we call it, going back to get forward. So I'd like to run just the animation just so Vic will feel good about his animation. Here you go. There it is. Because of all the guys that come on the show, and we do have a lot of East Coast musicians, you truly are a New York City guy. You are a Manhattan guy. You're born and raised.
Born and raised on the slimy little piece of bedrock known as and thrown out of 2 public high schools. And you have to be really fucked up. And
George Washington High, right?
Brandeis and G-dubs. Yeah. Threw me out of Brandeis for starting a riot. And because of the riots that happened after I went to George Washington, I couldn't stay any longer. So I met Eddie Ojeda there, though. However, let's put this in perspective.
Right.
So I met Eddie Ojeda at George Washington High School. If I hadn't been thrown out of Brandeis, I never would have met Eddie. I also met Jane Rabb, who is the producer of the TV show Sex and the City and Blue Bloods, and is one of my closest friends. And she's the one that dragged me to see the Dolls because she lived with Billy and Syl the year before, in 1971, before they came to New York. So my connections at George Washington were very strong. And George Washington was a very unusual high school in New York. For those of you who don't know, believe it or not, Henry Kissinger went to George Washington High School. Golda Meir went to George.
It sounds like welcome. It sounds like an episode of Welcome Back, Kotter. That's what all I think about. You know,
Manny
that was probably Brooklyn.
The baseball player went to G-dubs. Tiny Tim went to G-dubs. And me
tiptoe through the tulips. Wait a second.
Yeah, tiptoe through the tulips.
All right, Vic, you have a picture of Tiny Tim tiptoe through the tulips. Can you put that up right now? No, he says he can't.
Okay, and then me and Eddie Ojeda. So we all went to G-dubs, and G-dubs was great, except that the school system back then, there was riots every day because we were. This is where politics comes into play.
The climate, the political climate. That's what I really wanted to ask you about. Is like, you know, back then, and then I'll get to today. Mm-hmm. But do you find it worse today or back then?
I'm asked that all the time.
Yeah.
And my response, first of all, is in 1968 alone, we had Martin Luther King assassinated and Bobby Kennedy assassinated. So that was major. You had the race riots around the country, you know, in almost every major city. We had the mayor of Newark, Anthony Imperioli, and Newark is simply a 10-minute drive from Manhattan.
Jersey.
He was an avowed racist, white supremacist. I mean, he bought a tank. He bought a tank, like a tank, and an army tank, and drove it down the main street of Newark and dared black people to cross the line. Now,
so I guess your answer is it was worse then. That would be the answer.
Bad. I mean, George Wallace was running for president. He was the Donald Trump of his era. He had white supremacist, racist Ku Klux Klan members going to his. And I went to his rally in New York City. He sold out Madison Square Garden, and I almost got my head. Oh, there's Tiny Tim.
That's not George Wallace, by the way. That was Tiny Tim.
I almost got my head crushed by a mounted cop at that demonstration.
Legs getting broken, head getting crushed.
But to make things even more ironic, I met a girl in Bermuda in 1969 who was the great-granddaughter of Robert E. Lee from Atlanta. You know, she was from Atlanta originally. And I went and on Easter week of 70, went back to Bermuda, saw her again, and she asked me to move in with her in Richmond, Virginia. And I had never been anywhere in the United States south of Brooklyn. I'd been to Bermuda a couple of times, and that's another story, because if Bermuda never happened, Twisted Sister would never have happened. But
there's a lot of things that wouldn't have happened if Twisted Sister wouldn't have happened.
You know if I didn't go to Bermuda, there would never have been. I never would have been. Twisted Sister would never have occurred. But let me just say this: so I moved in with this girl, Gail, on May 2nd. On May 1st, 1970, I bought my first Les Paul from a junkie in Central Park for $300. And I took that guitar with me, and I took a Greyhound bus down to Richmond, and I'm living with this girl. And on May 4th, the Kent State murders occurred. Kent State killed the University of Kent State. At which point, if anyone was from that period, you would know that every university in the United States went crazy and rioted right after that.
So I've seen the footage. I was a little kid.
She lived around the corner from University of Richmond, or the University of Virginia, I guess, in Richmond. And so all hell broke loose. And I was looking at the time like Tiny Tim. I was actually looking like that. And I said to her, I can't stay down south. They'll kill me, looking like I did. So I came home, and my mother said, where have you been? I said, I moved in with Gail in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm dropping out of high school. Now, I was supposed to graduate in June, and this was May. And I said, I'm going to drop out. Fuck school. Screw the mansion. And she said to me, you know, almost like in the movie, what are you going to do with your life? She said, what are you going to do? And I I said to her, I'm going to become a rock star. Don't worry about anything. That's what those were my words. And I just said it to shut her up because I just didn't know what else to say.
Let me get this straight. New York City boy falls for the granddaughter of Robert E.
Great granddaughter of Robert.
Great granddaughter of Robert E. Lee.
Yeah.
I mean, the script is writing itself, and then decides to form a band. Because I was going to ask you, my next question is, out of all this tumultuous time, where the fuck did the guitar come into your life? And you just told me, from a drug dealer in Central Park, or from a pot smoker in Central Park. But how did the guitar sort of find you?
So I was a Beatle fan, like everybody at my age, who was 11 years old when the Beatles were on TV.
And you still are.
Well, the Beatles, yeah, of course. I write a Beatle column. But putting that aside, when I was 15, I was playing. I was 14. I was in a battle of the bands in my junior high school, and it was the first band I was ever in. And it was me, this Chinese kid named Bing Gong, and this drummer named Paul Herman. It was a 3-piece band, and we only did 2 songs. We did a Bob Dylan song and a song by the Fugs called "I Couldn't Get High." And we called the band, because it was me and Paul and Bing Gong. We called the band John, Paul, and Bingo.
Why didn't you do T-Rex, Bing Gong?
Yeah, well, because they weren't around yet. So we did like a Rolling Stone, and we did "I Couldn't Get High" by the Fugs, and I got thrown off stage because I was 14 years old. Why is a 14-year-old singing a song about not being able to get high in junior high school? And we lost to a band called the Bats, and the Bats were the hot shit band in the neighborhood, and I immediately broke up John, Paul, and Bingo, joined the Bats. They needed a bass player, so I got a bass guitar and messed around with bass. But it wasn't until I heard an album by the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, and that's kind of really what started it all. This Paul Butterfield Blues Band released an album in 1965 or 66, and it was their debut record, and I fell in love with the guitar player, Mike Bloomfield. His playing really blew me away. And
it's
then
very similar with Alice Cooper. He's the same way, Paul Butterfield, that blues band, and he has this same exact affinity for that artist as well in that band.
So I fell in love with that album, and then what happened was in 1967 I got really sick. Well, I was dealing weed at that point, so I bought a Telecaster because Mike Bloomfield played Telecaster, and I bought a Telecaster brand new on 48th Street for $135 because that's how much it was back then. And I got sick shortly after with mononucleosis, and I was home for 6 weeks. And I said to my father, buy me 3 albums. Buy me an album by this guy called Albert King. I said to him, Born Under a Bad Sign. I said, buy an album by this guy, John Mayall, called Blues Breakers, with John Mayall and Eric Clapton. And I think I said, buy me the Paul Butterfield Blues Band's follow-up album, East West. And those are the 3. So he bought me those records, and he brought them home. And, in those days you had your record player and you had your arm on your record player, and you started playing a song and you try to figure out a riff, and then you pick the arm up. And then after like 100 times you taped a penny on it because it was skipping, or a nickel.
You ruined a ton of vinyl. Yeah.
So, I'm playing it. And after 6 weeks of literally playing 8 hours a day, I slept with the guitar. The guitar was in the bed with me. I slept with the guitar.
Sleeping with a Telecaster, or what guitar was that? Or was that the Les Paul?
I was a Tele at the time.
Yeah.
I came out of my sickbed as a guitar player. I went, wow, I can play. I know enough to get by. And then I hung out in Central Park. So in Central Park in those days, there was a place called Bethesda Fountain, which is, by the way, right next to the Dakota and Strawberry
Where
Field.
John Lennon lived for a number of years.
Right. And was killed. And it's right there on 72nd Street. And I was the kind of the drug dealer at the Fountain anyway. And there was a lot of guitar players. We were all like 15, 16 years old, and everyone had a guitar, and everyone would just come down and I would say, how do you play that riff? Or how do you play that song? And how do you play that riff? And we would all just kind of show each other, what to do. And of course, then the Fillmore East opens up, and then these little clubs called Ungano's and Steve Paul's Scene, which were little restaurants, opened up, but they had famous stars playing them every night. And I am not kidding you when I say the most famous stars in the world played these 2 little restaurants in New York every night. Steve Paul scene. Do you know about this? Do you know about?
No, I don't know that. See, I'm sort of down when by the time I moved to New York, I was like, it was late 80s. So I was down in the village.
It was, or China Club even.
It's right where the China Club, because so that's Broadway. That's like a little bit uptown Broadway. Yeah.
So we had Steve Paul's scene and Ungano's, and Steve Paul scene managed Johnny Winter, and Steve Paul's brother Ricky was in my chemistry class at Brandeis High School. So Ricky says to me, my brother just signed a guy named Johnny Winter. And I said, I read about him in Rolling Stone. He signed the biggest record deal in history, $600,000. And Ricky Paul said, yeah, you want to go see him at the Fillmore? I'd never been to the Fillmore yet. So I said, sure. So he took me to the Fillmore. It was the first time. It was Terry Reid, B.B. King, and Johnny Winter. So it's like, oh my God, B.B. King. Oh my God, Terry Reid. By the way, for those of you who don't know, Terry Reid was supposed to be the lead singer of Zeppelin, but declined. Okay. Wow. And Johnny Winter. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. And then I find out that these two clubs, Steve Paul's scene, which Ricky Paul's brother owned, on 50th and 8th Avenue, and Ungano's, which was an Italian restaurant on 70th Street off of Broadway, hosted bands all the time, and famous English groups would go there because English musicians love small, tiny bars. So I don't care how crazy they are or what they may seem or to appear to be, but they love small, dark clubs where they can hang. So on any given night, you could go to Steve Paul's scene and Jimi Hendrix would be jamming with Johnny Winter or you just name it. And he's there he's like there all the time. Now, do you know the band Johnny Winter and, of course, right? So Johnny Winter and, well, the and of Johnny Winter and was the McCoys. Hang On Sloopy. They were the house band at the Steve Paul scene with Rick Derringer. So Johnny Winter hires them and says, I want to be in a band with you. We'll call it Johnny Winter and the McCoys. And Columbia Records says you can't use the McCoys name on the album cover because they're just a bubblegum pop band and no one's going to buy the record. So it turned into Johnny Winter and that's the history.
And that's where it stopped.
And that's where it stopped. And then you have Ungano's. So how cool was Ungano's? Here's how cool Ungano's was. Summer of 1969, I go to the Garden to see Blind Faith. And the two bands opening for Blind Faith were Delaney and Bonnie and Free. Okay? Free's first time in New York. The very next day, because I live on the Upper West Side, I'm walking by Ungano's and I'm 16, so I'm not allowed in Ungano's. You got to be 17. And I'm with a friend of mine, David Schiff. And David Schiff and I walk by Ungano's and we see this little sign on the side of the building. And it says, tonight, Dr. John, Spooky Tooth, and Free, in little plastic white letters that look like you're at a church. Jesus saves.
Yeah. They take them off after the show and then put it up with somebody else there. Yeah.
So I said to David, do you believe this fucking Italian restaurant? Look who's playing there tonight. Dr. John, Spooky Tooth, and Free. So David goes, we can get in. I go, how? He said, well, the manager of Spooky Tooth and Free met my mom and wants to fuck her. And to impress her, he told her that if any of his bands are playing, mention my name and to your kid, I'll get him in. And I said, and his mom was super hot. She was like super hot.
Stacy's mom.
Stacy's mom, yes.
Yeah.
So we walk into Ungano's, and there is Nicky Ungano, and he's sitting at the bar. He's sitting at the table, or sitting at the front desk. He's got like a pinky ring.
I can hear the Goodfellas soundtrack playing already inside my head.
Like, and he's like smoking a cigar, and he goes, what do you guys want? And my friend says, we want to see D. Anthony, the manager. And he goes, well, how the fuck do you know D. Anthony? He goes, my mother's name is Charlotte Schiff, and she knows D. Anthony. She said he can blah, 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 blah. So he says, well, I'll see you about that. And he goes back, and I'm thinking, I look at David. I go, David, if your mother doesn't know this guy, you and I are going to be at the bottom of the Hudson River, And out walked D. Anthony, and he goes, who are you? And my friend goes, oh, my mother's Charlotte Schiff. Oh, my God. Oh, So he takes us in. So here's what happens. We walk in, and there's like 20 people in the room. That's about it. Tiny, with a couple of long tables. And Free is playing on the floor. they're on the floor. So
Yeah, because they had they had to set up in front of the headliner, right?
well, wait
that
till you
goes.
hear what that but they were on the floor. So they were there. So it's Paul Kossoff is here and Paul Rogers is here. And D. Anthony takes us and he walks us right up to them. I'm literally 1 foot away from them. And he goes, "What do you think of my band?" And we're like, "We saw them last night at the Garden. They're really amazing, you know." And he goes, "Well, you guys have a seat and enjoy the night." So we sit down and we're sitting there going, okay, it's a free end. And Mickey Angana comes out and he goes, who wants to play tonight? You know, Spooky Through the Six. Anyone you want to get up and jam, you get up and jam. So this is who gets up and jams. Okay. Stevie Winwood gets on organ. Dr. John gets on piano. Jim Keltner gets on drums. Rick Gretsch from Blind Faith gets on bass. Chris Wood from Traffic gets up on sax.
These are all legendary names, folks. If you want to be taking notes on this one, because honestly, man, every single name you dropped are pretty much multi-platinum selling artists.
And they've been on biggest records on the planet, right?
Yeah.
Then Delaney gets up, Bonnie gets up, and Eric Clapton gets up. And they play 3 hours to me and David. And maybe it's a private party that we stumbled into. So that give you an idea of what life was like in the 60s?
No, we're sitting here talking old New York stories with JJ French, guitarist and so much more, founding member of Twisted Sister, folks. I'm telling you, man, I'm already seeing this turning into a part 2 because, you know, we haven't even scratched the surface of the history of the stories that you have. So, and I know you have a lot of other stuff going on, but I want to maybe leave one more little nugget of stories from back in the day, and then I want to move a little bit forward to the present. But there is a rumor going around. I want to clear it up about early Kiss Wicked Lester, and this is around early 70s. I would say maybe 72. Did you jam with them? Or were some of the guys in Kiss the ones hanging out in Central Park, you know, by the fountain? Or how did that Wicked Lester
those guys
audition happen?
they weren't New York guys. They were Queens guys. So there's a real difference.
There is a difference, right? The boroughs are all,
we call them OBs, outer boroughs, or B&Ts, which are bridge and tunnels.
Bridge and tunnels, yeah.
So they were OBs, but I didn't. That wasn't meant in a derogatory way. But I just never ran into them. However, in my apartment building, I was babysitting for a guy who was a lawyer, and he turned out his client was Ron Johnson, who produced the Wicked Lester demos. And he mentioned to me one night when he came back after dinner with his wife, he goes, "What are you doing these days? I hear you play guitar in the building all the time." And I said, "Yeah." I said, I'm looking for a band." He goes, "Well, I'm a lawyer for this guy Ron Johnson. There's a band called Wicked Lester, and they're looking for replacement players." So he gave me a phone number. I think it was Gene. I called Gene, and Gene said, "Can I see you play?" And I went, "Yeah, I'm playing this Sunday." This was in June of 72. I said, "I'm playing Sunday with a band called Scout at a church on 6th Avenue and 12th Street. I said, if you want to come down, you can see me play."
Right near the Limelight.
Well, not far.
Years later. Yeah. A
Not
couple streets up.
Yeah, not far from the Limelight. But it was a real church as opposed to a defrocked church. It was actually a church.
The stories of that church.
We were playing with a band called Scout. And the drummer for Scout at the time was Doane Perry, who wound up being Jethro Tull's drummer for 22 years later on. But Doane was just a kid from the park, a hippie in the park. So they came down and they saw me and we talked. And they said, they looked at me. I was still a hippie. I was like in the Allman Brothers thing. And they went, "You know, we have this band, but we're changing the image. We're going to really change. Are you into Slade?" Because we're really into Slade. And I hadn't heard of Slade at that point. And they said, "You should listen to Slade because that's what we're into," which makes perfect sense. If you listen to Kiss, I mean, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. So the summer before I was in England, I bought platform shoes at this place called the Chelsea Cobbler. So I had like a 1/4-inch platform, snakeskin platform. So they said, we're going to wear English style clothes and so on and so forth. So they said, "Come down to one of our Wicked Lester rehearsals, but don't tell anybody in the band why you're there. You're just there's a friend because we're firing them all." They all have beards, and he goes, "We're not going to look like that." So I would go down a couple of times, and then they got Peter, I think, and then we jammed a couple of times, and then that was it. and that lasted about 2 weeks. So that was it. I mean, I wasn't in anything. I was one of how many people possibly auditioned for them. And I've said this honestly, I make no claims. I was never in anything. I just simply was one of the guys who they listened to.
But right around that time, was that when Silver Star sort of to take flight?
What happened was I never heard back from him. I went, okay, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Joined an Allman Brothers cover band, spent the summer rehearsing in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. The band played one show Labor Day weekend 72. I come home and I'm looking for a glitter band again. Now the Dolls are happening, right? So now I'm looking for a real glitter band. I'm thinking to myself, well, Gene and Paul were probably right as far as, image changing.
The direction, where it might be
probably
going.
Correct. And their ad still appeared in the Village Voice. So I called it and they said, oh, no, we filled the spot. We got this amazing guy named Paul Fraley. You should come down and hear him. So about a month later, they invited me down to the loft on 23rd Street. And that was the day they played all of the Kiss songs Kissified in heavy, as opposed to Wicked Lesterized, which if you heard She, originally it's got flutes, it sounds like Jethro Tull.
A little Jethro Tullish, yeah.
So this was like Marshalls. And, most musicians have to understand this. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, American bands did not play Marshall amplifiers except for Jimi Hendrix. American bands played Fenders or Music Mans or PVs, but they didn't play Marshalls. Marshalls were part of the English mentality.
Is that British invasion, right? That came over?
Very British. Now Hendrix had his stacks, but Mountain, as heavy as Mountain wasn't playing through Marshalls. They were playing through Suns. Okay. So Kiss impressed me because they had Marshall amps. So you knew when I was in the loft and saw them play their first show for Ron Johnson, I just happened to be there. I saw a fully developed concept. They weren't wearing makeup yet, but the backdrop had just been painted by Ace. It was on a sheet. I think it was on a bed sheet. And I thought, these guys know exactly what they want to do. So when I would go see the Dolls, which is exactly the same time, I thought to myself, Kiss is doing a much more organized metal version of what I would consider to be the kind of British style heavy rock that I like, not this downtown Lower Manhattan Dolls-y, kind of like thing that the Dolls were doing.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I was really struggling. So how does Bermuda come into all of this stuff? Bermuda comes into
because you're still dating, were you dating her at this point? And how does Bermuda? And there's no twists without Bermuda.
Gail and I broke up at this point. Okay, but what happened was, I met many people in Bermuda over the previous 3 years, and one of the guys I met was a bass player, and that bass player moved in with a girl in New Jersey, and invited me to see him one day, and his drummer and a drummer lived next door, and the drummer was Tony Petrie, who wound up being our drummer. So we had an Allman Brothers cover band that broke up. And then what happened was now we're in November of 72. I get a phone call from Tony Petrie who says, hey, I know that we broke up the Allman Brothers cover band. I know you're getting into glitter. I know a band that's looking for a glitter guitar player. Okay. And he gave my number to this agent in New Jersey named Lou Mang.
Glitter.
Lou Manganello. And Lou and Frank Fichone, his partner. I got a phone call.
Bang a Gong is far gone at this point.
So I got a phone call from Mel, the drummer, the original drummer of the band.
Right.
And he says to me, I hear you's into glitter, and I go, yeah. And he goes, well, we're in the glitter band. We like the Dolls. We want to play better. So that was how I got my audition. So if I had never gone to Bermuda and met David, and David, that's the
somehow got you up to New York, a connection up there. Wow.
By the way, you familiar with Trainwreck amplifiers?
I am not familiar with Trainwreck, but this whole story sounds a little bit like a nice train wreck that worked out for you.
Among the most collectible amps are Dumbles and Trainwrecks.
Of course, I've heard of Dumbles. Okay, so tell me about Trainwrecks.
But they're not combo amps; they're big heads. Well, okay. Here's the crazy thing. So I'm in New Jersey with David, and we're just jamming at this guy's house in Fords, New Jersey. And this kid comes over from next door, and he knew Tony Petrie, and they kept throwing the kid out of the house. That kid became the developer of Trainwreck amplifiers. And I always thought to myself, why were we so cruel to him?
I could be
should have been nice
a gazillionaire with his amps.
I would have gotten a couple of Trainwreck. His sister follows me on Facebook. She goes, you guys weren't nice to my brother.
How much are those dumbbells and how much are they worth now? It's like people give their human organ parts, right?
$40,000, $50,000 for dumbbells these days. From what I understand, John Mayer collects them.
Yeah, he has. I know that he has a few of them.
There's a bunch of them. So amongst the elitist guys, anyway. So that's Trainwreck. So that's what happened. That's how I got the audition.
Shit. Okay, so
it's all in the book, by the way, which will be coming out.
That's the new book that's coming out, which we're going to sort of segue here now in part 2, even though I've already overextended our section of part 1.
I just realized I've got 5 minutes, and then
you got 5 minutes.
So then we can come back.
We'll definitely come back and do a number 2 because we do have a whole section of Let the People Speak there, JJ.
Oh, okay.
But hold on, folks.
For an hour. Did you not know? Or did you book me for 2 hours? Because I had it for 1 hour.
You know what? We're kind of freeform over here at In the Trenches, but we'll do another part for sure because you are vociferous, you have great stories, and there's a lot to talk about. We haven't even gotten to the part where basically Twisted Sister takes over and then pretty much owns the 80s and everything that happens. I wanted to mention
that small time
that little thing, that little band you play in. But I you mentioned Slade, and I know that if there wasn't Slade, there might not be We're Not Going to Take It. In that sense,
Alice Cooper's, because Dee worshipped Alice and worshipped Slade, and I think that's the hybrid in the early stages when Dee came on board, because we then mixed in AC/DC and Judas Priest. So if you want to look at our influences, I would say it's Alice, Slade, AC/DC, Judas Priest, with a smattering of Sabbath.
I love it. Well, check it out. We're going to do one quick section before we have to set you off from free because I know you got a hard count to get out of here. But we're going to have a quick little intermission, tiny little break. We're going to talk about, I guess, the System 12 there, Mr. Vic, as we can. And we will come back with Let the People Speak. Just a couple questions from the crowd. All right. You're here with JJ French on In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie. Hit it now, Vic. Hello, folks. Ryan Roxie here, and thanks for watching and supporting all things we are doing over here at the RGA, otherwise known as the Roxie Guitar Army Headquarters. We'd like to invite you to start your own guitar journey with the most comprehensive and easy-to-learn course that's out there today, the System 12 Guitar Method. I've taken my 40-plus years of experience of playing guitar and combined it with some of the best tech and guitar life hacks to come up with a system that'll get you playing not just the guitar, but entire songs in a very short time. Check out the links provided and make sure to enjoy the lessons. And of course, enjoy the ride. Now, back to the show. We are back now with Mr. JJ French of Twisted Sister, also per record producer, manager. But right now, before JJ has to step out, because we do have sort of a hard time to get out. I know that everybody here in the chat, you've been more than supportive, putting up your comments. Vic, our producer, has been collecting them. We have just a few questions from the chat. That's over at the Ryan Roxie official channel. If you want to subscribe on that, this is our segment called Let the People Speak. Come on, Vic, hit it. So here's a little section, just a couple questions before you got to split. From at Lily McCartney, whom I think you might know. You might have done one of her podcasts lately. She wants to know more about the Twisted Method of Reinvention.
So the book Twisted Business is coming out, and it really teaches the Twisted Method of Reinvention. So where you give guitar lessons or you support players, I support entrepreneurs. And what the Twisted Method is, it's TWISTED. And when I do my keynote speaking, I talk about TWISTED. These are the tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, trust, education, and discipline. And these are the 7 rules that we use to become successful. So while you may think it was sex, drugs, rock and roll, or you make a deal with the devil, was actually business. Is really what it was, and I formally put it together, and that's how I do my keynotes. That's why I'm hired by businesses. That's why I'm hired by corporations to talk about leadership and to talk about success.
You've always been an entrepreneur like that. You've always done things that not just you take the guitar and then you sort of, use that to go up to the next level. You've managed the band on and off since its inception, right? So what got you into all those different opportunities?
I think it was, okay, so you started this thing with a teaser, which is, why did JJ say that all of a sudden he's had like an epiphany?
Yes.
The epiphany that I've had is that I've always looked at myself in the third person most of my life. And I always said, wow, just don't forget what you're looking at, because you're going to be talking about this someday. Like the things I experienced were important enough to explain it. So was I a drug dealer? Yes. But I was a drug dealer because I wanted to explain what that was like to somebody. Or was I a drug addict? Well, I was, but I stopped it when I wanted to stop it, because I wanted to report back as to how I did it. Was I a rock and roll musician? Yes, I was. Was I a guitar player? Yeah, because I wanted to report back as to what that was like. Was I a manager, or am I a manager? Yes, because I want to report back to that. So what am I now? I'm a journalist. I write for magazines, and I write tons of columns, and I support entrepreneurs. And I basically want to say, hey, look, I'm you. I'm a guy, just a regular guy, but I experienced a crazy life, and I survived that crazy life. And this is how I survived that life. And that's
you can check out, and also you have a podcast as well, The French Connection. And you can check out JJ with his podcast, as well as check out all the columns that he writes. One is for Goldmine Magazine, am I right? And also Copper Magazine.
Audio, on PS Audio, Copper. PS Audio is an audio company, and they have their own online magazine called Copper. If you go to psaudio.com, Copper, you hit it, and in the magazine section of Copper, my articles come up under Twisted Systems, and it's high-end audio. Plus, I collect guitars, and I can talk that. I can talk Beatles all day long because I write for Goldmine. So there's a lot going on.
I'd like to have you come on again, and we can talk a little bit more Beatles. We can talk a little bit more equipment, and we can definitely talk a little bit more Twisted Sister. Does that sound pretty good?
That sounds great. I'd love to. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, there's all the connections. If you are listening to on the audio chat, JJ, can you tell people how to get more in touch with you? And if you want to follow JJ on all of these social media platforms, tell them where to go, Jay.
Yeah, if you want to email me directly, you can go. You can send it to oh God, how many different ask JJ French at gmail.com. Jason, you can write me at jasonammo at gmail.com, JAYSON at gmail.com, Jason Ammo, AMMO. And, I'm easy enough to reach, pretty much. And I like giving advice to people. It's fun. I like
there you go.
Being a mentor.
One last question, and this has to do with the picture that our producer, Vic Chalfant, has combed the internet through. It's a fact or fiction question, and that's all it is. It goes a little bit back to the past, because like I said, next time you come on, JJ, we're going to talk a little bit about more the present stuff, Twisted Sister history up until today, and obviously the 7 studio albums and even more live albums, which I found quite surprising and cool that you've had more live albums than studio albums. But this question is fact or fiction. It's a picture of a man, and the question is, has this man ever bullied you in high school?
No, we didn't go to the same high school, but that man's brother and I sued the Board of Education together in 1968. Okay, that's Toby for you. All right.
There you go. So just so you know, he was supposed. I guess that would be fiction. He did not bully you. You did not bully him.
We were not in the same school.
So there it is, fiction completely. But that's all I wanted to leave you with, Mr. JJ French. Hang on for 1 second while I say goodbye to everybody in the chat, because we will have a part 2 with JJ French. Again, thank you for spending time with us, everybody. We have a very special show next week where we will, actually on Saturday, you can put it up, Vic. This is our big announcement that we're talking about. There is going to be an official Alice Cooper band meeting online this coming Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. I hope that's the right time, Vic. I love you for putting that up and putting it together, but it's going to be a band hangout. We'll start promoting it right now. Federico, you'll start getting inundated with all that stuff. But right now, go back and check out all these nuggets of information that our guest JJ French has bestowed upon you. Again, JJ, thank you very much for being on the program. I really appreciate it.
Okay, talk to you soon, man. Bye-bye.
Hey, have a good one, guys. And until next time, I'm Ryan Roxie. Enjoy the ride. See you, man.
In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie.